Hello there, traveler, and welcome back to our series on the development of Dwarf Fortress. If you missed our first episode, that's where we first met Zach and Tarn Adams, a pair of brothers whose shared love of game making had them create dozens of experimental titles playing with systemic design.
When we left them last, they were on the eve of releasing the first free version of Dwarf Fortress, a game they would go on to spend the next 5,964 days updating before it had any type of broad commercial release. In this episode, we're going to explore that 16-year period, the work the brothers did, the community that embraced their game, and the real-life drama that pushed them into commercializing their life's work.
We're going to be dumping a lot of Dwarf Fortress knowledge on you in this episode. I'm just going to come out and say it. But don't worry, my mission is that by the end of this video, you will be a fan of Dwarf Fortress. Even if you never played the game, you'll be a fan. You'll kind of understand it a little bit. So let's start with something easy. A nice boat trip. You know, before we get to the 20 minutes of ASCII gameplay.
Yeah, always nice to see the city, of course, and also just to kind of look around at what we got. Yeah, no, it's great. I love it out here. Everyone loves this. Everyone loves the ferry boat. This is one of the highlights of coming out here, being in the center of the water, and being surrounded by mountains. Especially on a day like it's nice in the summer too. You get less snow on the mountains, but when it's not overcast, you get blue skies everywhere, and you can see Mount Rainier. You can see all the mountains all the way up north to Canada. And every single one of these mountains you can visit, you know, there's hikes everywhere. It's great.
You're like Todd Howard. You see that mountain over there? You can climb it.
Yeah. No, this is the kind of place that would inspire you to make those kind of systems, right? And that was one of those things when we were talking about like weird little games we worked on and stuff. These are the kind of ideas everybody has. We had a game we were making in like 1994 or so that was kind of based on, and this is the first place we saw this, War in Middle-earth was this old game where you had like a strategy map, but you also had like this weird combat view that was side-scrolly, like you could see the little hobbits and orcs walking, and you could see the background. So if you were close enough to Mount Doom, it'd put like a Mount Doom in the background. So we were going to proceduralize that, make this procedural map and detect the distance to the landmarks and then kind of show them behind you when you were walking through these areas and stuff. And so, yeah, it's like that. It's like the kind of thing that everybody wants to do. All these different games were always kind of headed in the same direction. Dwarf Fortress is a colony management game. You basically have a group of dwarves and they mine in the mountain. You don't control any specific dwarf, but you just kind of order their general activities and just make the best of things as trouble comes your way on occasion, as it tends to do with the poor little dwarves, and make sure that you have enough alcohol to drink, and make sure that you're farming mushrooms and making little golden goblets and so forth. But when it comes to like what makes the game more unique is that it actually takes place in a persistent world that the game will cook up for you each time. So you can run a world generation, which is sort of this historical procedure that runs out, you know, some hundreds of years of history in a world map that's been cooked up just for you. And then you can play as many fortresses as you want in that map, and the old ones will impact the new ones and so forth. You might have a dwarf from your old fortress come and migrate to your new fortress, and you'll recognize them. It'll be the same dwarf with all the same, you know, their personalities intact. You know, whether or not they're missing their pinky finger is intact. All that stuff is there. It's the same dwarf, and you can also play a single-player RPG, so you can visit your retired fortresses, talk to your old dwarves. I mean, it's not that great, right? We don't have like a script writer like writing like this whole story of your dwarves or whatever, but they'll talk to you about, you know, what they've been doing and so forth. And over the years, it's become incredibly complicated and so forth, and that feeds into this whole notion that's at the center of the game, which is emergent narrative, right? It's the idea that you can be playing a game without a story, but a story will still arise as you follow the different threads and pieces of information that are presented to you. Because your own mind is a story building engine, and we can help that by, you know, in our game design processes to encourage that kind of thing to happen. So it's really sort of a collaboration with the player to produce a bunch of stories, and you can just look up Dwarf Fortress stories as a Google search and you'll see what we mean by that, because people have done really amazing work.
Just as Tarn said, every game of Dwarf Fortress's main mode, Fortress Mode, begins with World Generation, where thousands of years of history are simulated, laying the cultural, geological, and architectural foundation of the world your dwarves will mine and drink in. From here you're told to strike the earth, to mine and find minerals that can better your fortress and attract more dwarves. But you'll also have to make sure that the dwarves you have are happy. You see, each dwarf has their own needs, skills, desires, and moods. They form friendships, faith groups, and have pets. They even have their own fears and nightmares based on things that happen to them in their lives. The trick with Dwarf Fortress is slowly understanding the layers of complexity that exist within its complex network of menu screens, as it's in these menus that information about your dwarves and their lives is buried, and it's this information that helps build stories.
Hey, did you notice how some of the gameplay earlier looked slightly easier to understand than some of the earlier gameplay? Like slightly?
That's because while the core version of Dwarf Fortress uses ASCII graphics, at a certain point in time, users of the game decided to make their own graphical tilesets to make it slightly easier to parse the noise. In fact, modding the game through third-party software like DFHack has become part and parcel of being a Dwarf Fortress player. This is just one of the ways in which Dwarf Fortress has evolved over the years, and to truly understand the game as it exists today, we need to appreciate how far it's come.
I know this sounds like homework, but it's relevant context that we need. So just give me 3 minutes. 3 minutes to compress like 16 years of Dwarf Fortress history. And I promise, at the end, I'll give you one of Tarn's funny anecdotes, okay? Deal? Let's do it.
On the 8th of August 2006, the first version of Dwarf Fortress, version 0.21, was made public. In this you could play Fortress Mode or Adventure Mode. Fortress Mode is the main mode in Dwarf Fortress where you run a fortress of dwarves, and Adventure Mode is where you control a single character and explore the world. In this early era, the main reason for Adventure Mode was really to load up old fortresses you'd built and run into the ground, no pun intended, to explore them one more time. The big difference between this and modern versions of the game is that there was no Z-axis. The game had no depth. You couldn't dig down into the ground underneath you, something that seems pretty critical to a game about mining. No, instead you started outside of a mountain and dug laterally into that mountainside. After about a year of updates, mostly concerning bug fixes, the next major update came. Version 0.27 added the elusive Z-axis, allowing dwarves to dig down, and as such it also included several updates to caverns, new biomes in World Generation, plenty of new creatures and objects to create. Dwarves were given updates too, including more detailed skills. The next major milestone came on April Fool's Day 2010 with version 0.31, a massive update which added materials and attributes to objects, more detailed fortresses with an expanded suite of rooms and cavern types, huge updates to how military combat worked, including training, equipment, tactics, combat, and detailed body parts. Hospitals and healthcare were added too. Dwarves had more stats, including emotions. They had more detailed body parts with organs, skin, nails, and bones. They had more appearance attributes, and they even got souls, which stored mental health attributes. 2 years later, on Valentine's Day, 0.34 added towns, trading markets, grazing, food, vampires, werewolves, undead creatures, and evil parts of the world. It had historical figures dwarves needed to eat and drink, and law and justice was added. The 0.4 updates began in the summer of 2014, and this is where Dwarf Fortress's complexity began to get really out of control. In these updates, changes were made to the game's code, allowing the world outside of your fortress to be simulated instead of it being in a frozen state when you weren't looking at it. The tavern update allowed people to visit and trade with your forts. Passing visitors could become citizens, even including non-dwarves, so you had to figure out their needs. Bar fights could happen in taverns, stealth and sneaking were added, and there were loads more objects and room types. Libraries could attract scholars. Those libraries needed books, but also books could be written. Books could also be read, providing knowledge to dwarves, which could be spread to other dwarves. The game was converted to 64-bit, and Adventure Mode was updated throughout this process too. Of course, back then all of this was done on the old ASCII version. Dwarf Fortress wouldn't get official tile art until version 0.5 and the Steam release, but we'll get to that later.
The thing is, we had what was called the dwarf economy, which was a thing that turned on when you got your settlement large enough to kind of have a broker, maybe a mayor or a baron. I don't remember quite what the switch was. And it was famously broken. Like we immediately gave every dwarf an account, an abstract account. They would try to take the minted coins and match their account in their room, so everyone would be like hoarding different amounts of coins. And we did this for adventure mode, so that you'd go back and there'd be treasures everywhere in these rooms and stuff. And like after your fortress fell apart. But the thing was, we just started throwing in concepts, and we were like, okay, so now the dwarves have to pay rent on their rooms and stuff like that. And if you're not doing that with all of the concepts that come into play, then it's going to fall apart. And it did. Immediately the rents kind of went higher than they could pay, and you have all these homeless dwarves everywhere. And so we took it out. And then we were like, we're going to approach this properly. And so I got tons of economy books, learned a bunch of stuff, said that, okay, now the caravan arc where we do fair cycles, like medieval fair cycles and markets and all of this stuff, thinking about like sea loans for like ventures and things like that, because our year is 1400, and stuff like insurance and stuff had been kind of invented at that point or whatever. There's all this cool stuff. And it's all kind of just out there as an upcoming for the last 16 years.
Is that why it's a project that's easy to keep working on, because there's all these new types of game you basically get to add to the main game?
Yeah, no, I mean, how can you get bored with this, right? I mean, it's there's so many things that are like that. I mean, when we were talking about laws for doing the economy, doing this change so that there could be like lawmaking, like what does that actually look like? I mean, do we add like little senates and stuff and little village councils and things, and then they have these deliberations and stuff? It's endlessly fascinating. So yeah, we've just got new files uploaded by the artist, which is Dwarven Hair for Children. And somewhere in here, I believe these little things here might be the little mutton chops and beards for the youngsters.
Are dwarven children born with beards?
They're born, I think they're born clean shaven, but it instantly begins to grow in. Just like their fingernails and everything else will grow. I mean, I guess kids are born with fingernails, obviously, but the length of them, they don't. Actually, that's a fascinating question to me. That's going to disturb the heck out of me now. Is like, are little babies born with fingernails? But why weren't they like growing before? Why aren't they born with like big curly nails? Like when do they start growing? Or are they born without fingernails and they come in? This is the promotional image for our PAX party. It's kind of produced there. I think that's Zach, me, and Alexandra, our community director. Oops, sorry. All right. Excellent. So,
you guys are up. Would you mind if we got a picture as well?
We walked away and we were like, we should ask.
yeah, no, you gotta ask. Yeah. No, we have.
Thank you so much.
So, however you would like to arrange yourselves.
Dwarf Witch is the game that makes me feel stupid. Honestly, you try to play it and there's so much depth to it that you never know what to expect. You start off with just like a small little fort, like, hey, I want to build like a couple little rooms for my people, and then you never know, like immediately you're hit with goblins coming in or an invasion or any kind of like Christmas present coming your way. But I still think the best thing that carries forward, like not even the game, is that it's fun. No matter what, if you win or lose, you have fun, you're creating a story and you're having a good time with it.
You're looking up from heaven and looking at all these little guys running around, basically. And you tell them what to do, and sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they get into trouble. Sometimes one of them will open the gate and all the goblins will get in and kill everybody, or one of them will get sick and you'll have your own little pandemic going on. Sometimes they won't feed each other or leave people to die in the beds in the nurseries. Like, they're very clumsy dwarves.
I was a member of a forum called Something Awful, 2006, 2007, maybe like 2008, somewhere around that timeline. And I downloaded it. It was a little daunting because, especially back then, it was still all like ASCII graphics. So like, you didn't have like a dwarf or a camel. You had like an H or a semicolon, or like grass was dots and periods, and like an equal sign was a door maybe or something. I'm trying to remember, like X is a floodgate. And it was a different type of game because you didn't do things, you requested things. You're like, hey, I want you to build this. Well, maybe the doors will get around that if you've done it kind of right. Things happen that you not only don't intend to, but like you're surprised by. Even if everything can be going to plan, you can still be surprised by the game.
I think on the website or somewhere it says like your new favorite hobby or something like that. And I took that very much to heart, where like I'd be doing homework and it would just be on in the background, and then I'd always be checking back on it, and then something would happen. I'd be like, oh great. And it's so fun.
We were going great. Like in the fall, we'd collect peach pits and we'd make wine, and my dwarves would be happy, and we'd farm a little bit. I think they're mushrooms. They love the mushrooms. And everything was generally going great and peaceful when a giant lamprey came and descended upon the fort. I think the siege lasted a couple years. The lamprey hung around the walls. He wouldn't let anyone out or in. He killed traders. He killed all the wildlife. And eventually the food stores really started to dwindle. It got really desperate. So I sent the army out, and they were massacred. They were all gone. The lamprey made his way inside, and by the end of it, there was a single child left, dying in a hospital bed. No one was there to give her water, so she lived out the last couple months of her life with the lamprey lurking the halls, and that was it. Eventually it ended. It was amazing. Yeah, you don't get that in any other video game. I love Dwarf Fortress, man.
If Tarn and Zach are Dwarf Fortress's engine, then the community is its fuel. Each player in Dwarf Fortress is a god, stretching down to try and decipher the tiny lives of their world's inhabitants. And the ways in which these stories are told has evolved just as the internet has. Arguably the most famous story of them all is Boat Murdered, a darkly comedic telling of the fate of a particular fortress over the course of 14 in-game years, each year operated by a different member of the Something Awful forum, each of whom told their story and passed the save game on to a new player. The YouTube era has given birth to creators like Krugsmash, who combine his Fortress gameplay with charming artistic renders and a comforting voiceover. Streaming has led to channels like Blind IRL, who, as it happens, we hired to capture much of the gameplay used in this documentary. The Dwarf Fortress forum has been the heart of this community over the years. There are countless Reddit threads sharing stories. Podcasts like A Strange Mood and Dwarf Fortress Roundtable provide whimsical stories from the host's games. I leave links to all of these creators in the video's description. To help make their stories more vivid, many fans have added mods of their own, including texture packs, interface tweaks, and custom sound effects. But for Tarn and Zach, the most important part of designing Dwarf Fortress is ensuring that players are given the moments that inspire stories, whether the brothers planned them or not.
A core part of the sort of storytelling aspect of it as well seems to be like player imagination to a certain extent. Like they also add it's like a soup kind of.
Yeah, you can't stop that. Like people are going to try and explain what happened, and sometimes the game flipped a coin. That's literally what it did. And they're like, no, this was the rich, the personality model. And I looked through and I found that this dwarf was somewhat miserly. And that is why they would not, they didn't bring this item here when literally they just like called off on another job or something, right? And you feel a little guilty about that a bit sometimes, that like, no, that's not there. Or you feel like you want to correct somebody or something like that. But no, this is just everyone knows that this is how it works. I think at least after a while, when you've been playing games for a while, you know that you're adding to it. You don't know quite what's there. It's kind of like a magician. You don't want to go in and just like ask them all their tricks or whatever. But occasionally they're just like, they actually underestimated what the game did. And I'll spool a giant thing out for them. They're like, no, this was actually, this really cool thing that happened or whatever.
Some bug reports?
Yeah. We're looking through all the new bug reports, and there are some weird ones. It looks like dogs are spoiling parlays, possibly, so that if like you're going to have this high risk meeting with the goblins and maybe exchange an artifact, so they'll leave your fort. Like if you bring a dog with you, just start attacking them or whatever. It's like it does not respect what's going on here because the dog knows best. Crossbow bolts falling through the floor. They don't stockpile hair.
Caravan got stuck loading goods. Departure wagons get killed.
Wagons get killed. It says killed in quotes, so some bad is happening. Tame goose refuses to lay eggs. Well, where iguana and where jackal graphics are reversed.
Oh yeah, I know that one.
Well, it's easy to fix, but just another.
Are there were babies?
No, well, I mean, they're.
Can a baby turn into? I think a baby can turn into.
A baby, a little baby can turn into a giant were creature, but it'll be an adult. But then when it's done, and it will actually, as it's doing that things, it will understand its environment as an adult, but then it'll turn back into a baby.
How do you handle a Gorlak?
I bet the werewolf would form memories too. Oh god, that's terrible. Because when they're in their werewolf form, they would form memories only during that time that would get saved in their long-term memories. But then the baby would like be able to reflect only on those werewolf moments, but they would reflect on them as if they were an adult. So they'd be trapped in this like weird time bubble, like they were a ghost of themselves, kind of this weird lunar cycle. And then suddenly when they're 2 and they're a child in the game, suddenly that's just all contextualized and fine as their childhood. And they would think of it as all of this weird crap that happened to me when I was 0 years old. And that traumatizes me for the rest of my life because those memories would all be bad. It's like the time I murdered my father or whatever and ate him or whatever, and they'd just be remembering that over and over.
Hi, my question is, how do you resolve conflicts within yourself between the side of you that wants to make a game that's awesome and the side of you that wants to write code that works?
Well, I mean, how many open bugs are on the tracker?
Oh, there's me.
Yeah, apparently that conflict is just resolved. Cave floater skin is made from frozen clay floater juice? What the fuck?
Latex.
Like latex, yeah. So maybe it's like this icy, this orange ice cube that squirts latex at you. Just because we screwed up some numbers.
Yeah.
Did you guys fight much?
Not anymore. We've had our fights back when we were teenagers about the one I remember is that Gladiator game we were making where we finally had VG graphics when we were making this body with muscles, one muscle at a time. And we had a violent disagreement over whether they should be kind of like color-coded single color muscle groups, whether they should kind of have striation on the striated muscles and stuff. And we don't even remember who was who, I think, at this point. And we were just...
I remember I had dissected a fetal pig in science class, and that's where my idea of what the muscles should look like was.
Yeah, I think I was looking at Mom's medical books or something. Yeah, it was just not... It was a violent disagreement.
How difficult is it now to put new, what would you even call them? Like, what do you call a thing that goes into Dwarf Fortress?
We just have a checklist. There's 50 things you have to do to add a thing. Like when we added musical forms or poetry type things, or when we added the notion of being poisoned by a rattlesnake, like these syndromes. We call them syndromes.
So that's so that's not being poisoned. That's the notion of being poisoned.
Yeah, like any, because it also works when you're like cursed by a mummy and you fail more of your skill rolls. It's like being poisoned by a rattlesnake, but it's kind of a permanent instance of this thing that lives over you,
right? In
a way that can affect you. But the mummy curse, and we have these on the procedural creatures or procedural undead, could just as be easily like they point at you and you have a necrotic thing growing where it's as if a rattlesnake bit you on your arm, right? And people always are entertained by that. We have the Forgotten Beasts have these like dust clouds sometimes or slimes on them that leave a trail, and then if you let your dwarves' shoes rot away and don't replace them, then occasionally you'll have your dwarves pathing through a place where one of those creatures, you vanquished this creature years ago, but there's just a mess in your fortress, and like your dwarves will be walking around and the stuff will transfer to their feet, and then immediately out of all these dwarves in the hospital, the ones that don't have good shoes, and their feet are just rotting away, and then the doctor has to come and do like the surgery to like excise the rotten tissue, like just saw it off, and they have to do the surgery roll, which is the same as a combat roll, which is the same as a butchery. It's all the same structures, and just cut off that chunk. That like a notion like that, we'd have, here's the 50 places in the code to add a new concept of that kind. Of all the things, that's something that's worked really well over, say, the past 10 years. Like we can introduce a new concept, introduce the player-facing side of it for modders, introduce the exposition side of it, saving and loading to the disk when your game is active. Just making sure we hit all these things, But the thing it doesn't get you is how does it interplay with all of the other elements in the game, which is something you just have to do. I mean, no one can do that for you, right? You just have to think about it, sit down and think about it, and you're not going to be able to do them all. Now we have, let's say we had 200 concepts in the game and we're going to go up to 201 concepts. You have to just accept that you're not going to have 200 possible connections. You're going to have like the 5 that you thought of.
Over the years, Dwarf Fortress carved out a reputation both inside the games industry and out. While stories bled out from the Dwarf Fortress forums, gaming websites would often comment on its unique place within the industry, while both the New York Museum of Modern Art and New York Times celebrated the game's idiosyncratic origin story and distinctive vision. But regardless of this attention, throughout all these years, Tarn was living incredibly frugally, programming all day, never traveling or having much of a social life. And for much of this time, the boys were giving away the game for free. That was until one fateful day when a fan showed Tarn how to stick a PayPal donation button on the Bay 12 website, just so he could send them some money for his birthday. Over the next weeks and months, more and more players donated via this button. It was never enough for both boys to work on Dwarf Fortress full time, but it was a massive help. But when the membership platform Patreon launched, the boys set up their own page, allowing them a small but steady income from their patrons. At this stage, it was enough for Zach to leave his convenience store job and join Tarn on the project full time. But Tarn wasn't getting out much. He locked himself in his apartment and focused on Dwarf Fortress. He told me how he fixed a wooden plank across the one window in his room to stop the sunlight from getting in. He slept during the day, choosing to work from 11 at night until 7 in the morning to limit distractions. And while Zach had worked many difficult jobs over the years, at least he had somebody else to share the tough moments with.
I think it's about time we introduced you to the third member of this crew. She doesn't program or make art, but her contribution to this story is quite significant.
So I'm Annie Forsman Adams. I'm married to Zach Adams, so I'm Tarn's sister-in-law. Yeah, we met online. He just was so genuine, and he wasn't afraid of looking silly or just anything like that. He just wanted to be himself. He's also pretty weird, which I really liked. And I think on our first date, he told me a story about celebrating Tarn's cat's birthday. My family is really important to me, and he said the same thing. He's like, if we don't get along with each other's families, like there just isn't a future here. I met Tarn, and it was the same thing. It was just like, here are these two, I think we went to the zoo. That was our first family date. I think my favorite thing about them is they are so silly. They are just so silly. It's really easy for them to just find the funniness in everyday life. And that makes life fun to live. It just makes them fun to be around. It makes hard days better. It makes the tragedies of the world easier to kind of stomach. So I grew up here. I grew up in a indigenous reservation called Suquamish, which is not far from here where we currently are. We actually live there now. My life was pretty difficult growing up as a kid. My parents struggled with mental health and addiction, and we had a lot of trauma that happened. And we also, we were constantly dealing with the generational trauma of being Indigenous people living on in the Indigenous community that we had lived in forever. So my family, we can trace our ancestry back to Chief Seattle. We've lived on the reservation unbroken. I was raised there. If we ever had children, we would raise them there. I've gone through dozens of years of therapy, and they talk about the family roles, and my role was very much the caretaker. And so I was taking care of my mom, who was chronically ill, and taking care of my dad, and just that was my role. And then one day that all just kind of stopped. My dad had been sober. My brother, who also struggled with addiction, got sober, and my mom had passed away, and all of a sudden I was kind of like, well, what do I do now? I don't have a role. Zach and I met just as I had started my career, and I was working as an advocate. And then he really helped me. He was really a big support in being like, okay, you want to go back to school, that's what you want to do, let's do it. We'll figure out a way to make it work.
Annie had been part of the boys' family for most of the development of Dwarf Fortress. She later graduated with a BA in criminology and has had a great career in the local justice system since, rising to project director for the Washington State Native American Coalition Against Domestic Violence. She was attempting to wrap up her master's degree when we conducted this interview. This also meant that as her husband, Zach was covered by her employer's medical insurance, while Tarn, on the other hand, was not. Annie is a good soul, and like the boys, disarmingly intelligent. In Zach she found a rock, somebody who made her laugh and smile and feel safe. They made a home for themselves and filled it with animals. Life wasn't always peachy. Zach, like Tarn, has struggled with his own mental health issues over the years, but in Annie he found somebody to advocate for him in those moments of need. But all of this was suddenly under threat when Zach went to the doctor about something that was worrying him.
To be honest, it's still a little bit of a fever dream. It was like, he went in, he had this thing on the side of his nose, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, no, we need to have that checked out. And the dermatologist said it's cancer. And then it was suddenly like, well, what the hell do we do? Like, cancer, like that's a really scary word. We were living with his parents at the time, so we had a ton of support. We had all the support we needed. He was on my health insurance. I had great health insurance. But it still ended up, we got a bill for thousands of dollars. And then like he's very prone to skin cancer. And so the idea that it could come back at any time is really, really scary. And then we started thinking about Tarn, and here Tarn has kind of all these same risk factors, all these same kind of early lifestyle things. And like, if that happened to him, he would be wiped out. Like that would just wipe him out. So we really started to think, one, about just the importance of like taking care of ourselves and getting regular checks and being able to go to the doctor regularly and being able to keep up on all of that. And then two, like, what is our long-term plan here? Because obviously this is gonna be something that continues to happen, and we're gonna have to have the money to pay for it. We didn't know what we were gonna do. But we have this thing, we have Dwarf Fortress, which was like this constant in all of our lives. And so, it ended up being the thing that like kind of saved us all.
After investing 2 lifetimes of time, energy, and passion into the Dwarf Fortress project, it was finally time for the game to give something back. But monetizing a buggy sim with no graphics and a hardcore fan base who were used to playing it for free was going to be no easy task.
On the next episode in this series, we covered the development of version 0.5, the version of Dwarf Fortress that would be sold on Steam, fitted with modern conveniences like graphics, sound effects, and a UI you don't need a master's degree to navigate.
Thanks so much for watching this episode. If you'd like to watch the third in this series, you can do so next week here on YouTube or right now over at patreon.com/noclip. And you'll also be helping support our small independent team create more stories like these.